Okay, good afternoon, Valeriya.
Yes.
How are you?
Hello. I'm fine.
Okay.
Welcome to the absolute first incredible premiere show with remarkable guest, my friend, and he, of course, he's every single day is in different show, so many years. But for me, it's a big privilege to have you. But as I we have discussed a little bit in advance, so I know when I'm together with you, I'm so reliable hands. And of course, now I'm starting with presentation of you and speaking about diversity. You are so great example of diversity, and we've been joking with you that before the other day that if I should just a little bit summarize and present you. So I should have probably established reality show, not just one podcast with you, because how can you actually put everything you have been done in your life just in one podcast show? But okay, let's just start, and I'm sure that it will be just our first, but I hope not last one. Then we can continue because you have done so much great. I'm so proud of you. And thank you heartfully for saying yes to open this show together with me. So please welcome to Diversity is the Game Changer, the first episode, the podcast where we celebrate the power of diversity and inclusion and explore the stories of those who drive meaningful changes in our community and globally. So I'm your host Valeriya Hjertenæs today, and like I've already mentioned, we have very exceptional guest who exemplifies the transformative impact of diversity, empowerment, and social reform. So joining us, Brooks Newmark. Welcome, Brooks. Businessman, philanthropy, social reform campaigner whose career spans everything: politics, finance, academia, charity, mentoring, you name it. So Brooks served as a member of parliament for Braintree from 2005 until 2015, during which time he held the influential role of Minister for Civil Society. In this position, you, Brooks, championed charities, voluntary sector, youth programs, making a lasting impact on countless communities. Today, Brooks is a doctoral candidate at the University of Oxford, my colleague. We started actually chatting about this subject, right? Where you were exploring education from Rwanda, but you will be telling much more about that yourself. And you're also a founder partner in education, a charity that collaborates with Rwandan teachers to provide inclusive, high quality education for children. And for many, many, of course, and for me, most probably important that, oh my God, I'm really, really touched to all my heart what you have been doing, what you are still doing for my country, for my great, resilient Ukraine. It's unbelievable. It's really your angel, how you have been called by so many. And I think that, yes, absolutely, your angel and of Ukraine, and not just Ukraine. So, in addition to all your endeavors, you have been deeply involved in humanitarian work in Ukraine through your charity foundation movement, Mission Angels for Ukraine, where you helped evacuate over 35,000 people, shepherd 35 civilians, and deliver crucial aid to conflict zones. I'm so proud of you. I'm so thankful. You are exemplifying dedication to building strong, healthy, and compassionate communities. So it's great honor to have you, Brooks Newmark, to my very first podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be on here. Thank you for all those flattering comments. And I'm delighted also to be your guinea pig as your first podcast guest.
Thank you so much. And of course, when you start your first show, you are like sitting and kind of shaking, and you believe, oh, this is something new for me, and you try to be as nerd as possible. You really like, okay, should I say it by that and that? But at the end of the day, I believe we are all people, we are all humans. It's actually about storytelling, stories, right? So for me, I made the first like example of questions. They're kind of a little bit professional, very like rational. But then actually yesterday I decided to change and ask in another way to make like, you know, a little bit connection between being political and professional and being a human being with all these obstacles, with all these challenges we all have, we all display. So, and I would like to dive a little bit in the private life of your self, and starting about the first question. Just I didn't even write it, so maybe it's like bumpy question, but from my heart. If we are talking about little Brooks, little boy Brooks, who had his own goals, dreams, um, you know, aspirations. All kids, they have their special transformation, how they see approach this world, right? And I believe that our childhood, it makes a tremendous impact on the our decision in grown up life. So my question is, could you please describe a little bit, if you need, if you go back to little Brooks and actually reflect how this little Brooks could shape, impact uh, this grown up Brooks, which we are going to present today, please.
Sure, I think that's a good place to start, because I've always believed all adults are little children in an adult body. I think where whatever forms us is formed at a very, very early age. And I think the important thing is to have nurturing parents, loving parents. And if you don't have that, it causes a huge amount of damage. So if I look back at little Brooks, his father died when he was very young, and was left with a very damaged individual, which was my mother. So I'm not going to pretend that I had a loving upbringing. And so you're not getting into this, but you know, I'm very much the child of a narcissist, and a narcissist can cause huge damage, because what that does to a small child is seeking approval when one never gets approval. Whatever you do can never be good enough if you're the child of a narcissist. All they do is criticize you. So that led to me always pushing myself, but always pushing myself because I wanted the approval of somebody who I could never get approval from. So that can go one of two ways for people. Either you can be a super achiever, or you can get crushed by the individual.
Yeah.
Luckily, I ended up pushing myself harder and harder, and to achieve more and more, to the point that by the time you become an adult, you don't need the criticism from the individual that you had as a small child, because it's already in your brain, right? You're now hardwired in many ways to be an achiever, to try and do something. So that leads to two things. Either as an adult, you can say, hey, I had a tough time and everybody else has to just tough it out, or you can be compassionate. There are two directions people go. I happen to go, luckily, the compassionate route. Why? Because in many ways, my adult life has been a combination, if I self-analyze myself, of both rescuing my mother, who grew up in a highly damaged household herself, because she herself had abusive parents. So part of me is rescuing my mother, which I could never do. And the other bit is rescuing the small child that's sort of within me. And so it manifests itself to doing perhaps the good things that you've talked about, and the things that have driven me to do my charitable work in Rwanda, to do the charitable work with homelessness in the UK, to decide with some crazy idea of going to Ukraine in 2022, early on in the war, when I didn't know Ukraine, didn't know Ukrainian or anything, but just felt this compulsion to go and help people. I think you're right to start at the point of the child Brooks, or the small Brooks, because it all started at that point. I suspect if I'd had a happy childhood, I would not have perhaps achieved the things that you highlight, because I probably would have been complacent and happy with everything in life. I wouldn't needed to have pushed myself. I wouldn't have needed to take the risks to get approval, and so on. So there are pluses and minuses to that rather nice list that you laid out of all my achievements, but the cost is a huge amount of damage personally at a very young age.
Thank you so much, Brooks, for being so open with us. I said so much appreciation to that. And if I would add on that comment, actually, it applies so much to me, to my private experience. And yes, that's so true, that it's actually double choice then how you can transform that traumatical childhood, because I've been experienced the same very traumatical childhood. My parents got divorced when I was 7 years old, and I've never got any help from my father or support. And unfortunately, he was struggling with alcoholic problems. And yes, it was very abusive model or roles of the whole unhealthy situation in family. It has or impact, of course, my childhood and how I could transform all this experience further. So, like you said, I also felt like we kind of two options. You can choose that the whole life you can be just complaining, and you can be as offer, right? I said, yes, because due to this childhood, I'm that and that. Or you can transform it to something, really be resilient, and also think, okay, but what can I do now? I can take responsibility. I'm the grown up person, and maybe even to kind of heal yourself, to transform it, to take away pain from another persons, or kids or children, right? Because you want at least maybe to save one or two. You save one, you save the whole humanity, right? So for me, it was basically the decision when and how I decided to adopt kids from Ukrainian orphanage with special diseases, diagnosis, or neurodivergent kids. But we will come back to that. So thank you so much. It was very touching for me to hear your story, and especially you being so open with us, really. And now, if we go a little bit to your career, right? So, and of course, we start a little bit with this topic, but we come back. We everybody say like you should have like the red thread the whole speech. I love my favorite color. I'm so diverse in Norway. It's pink. It's rusa. It's everywhere rusa. So we trying to have like the pink thread through the whole conversation. So, but if we are talking about subject diversity in leadership now, because you're a PhD researcher, me as well, and I'm advocating for diversity, and mostly about diversity management, because diversity for itself is not a cause. I really mean it should get the result, but it should be managed, right? I mean, this is topic and subject I'm making research about, diversity management or leadership. But in your experience as a former politician and UK minister and member of parliament, how has diversity and leadership influenced policy making and decision making process? If you could please give some example from your career, please.
Sure. So I was in business before. I was in something called private equity, which was buying and selling unlisted companies or trying to turn those companies around. But when I was in business for a good 15 years before I went into politics, there was much more gender balance. It was still something relatively new, but in most meetings I'd go to, there were at least a third of the people in the room would be women. When I went into politics, though, that was not the case. So I was a conservative politician, and on my side, there were, I think, maybe 7% of the people in my party were women, and the rest were men. So I remember going into my first debate, a Treasury debate, in Parliament,
Mhm.
and there were about 80 Labour women on the other side, and there were 3 women on my side in that debate. And I realized there was a problem here, a problem in my
Mhm.
party, the Conservative Party. And I knew there were lots and lots of very smart women out there, but for some reason they weren't going into public service. So I founded this organization with a friend of mine, Anne Jenkin, and we started organization called Women to Win, which is to try to attract women from all walks of life into politics. And from that founding, it took off hugely. Like, people were so surprised that we were encouraging women to go into the party. And most important thing we would do is provide them the support and training. You can't have diversity if everything is skewed to men, right? So there were loads of
Yeah.
men there. When I wanted to be an MP, lots of people gave me great advice. If you're a woman, much tougher. And so we set up a network and a framework to give women the same support that certainly the men were having. And so we sort of went from, I think there were 17 women in my party at the time, to I think something like 68 women in the next parliament, to then 88 women in the following parliament. And so we quickly grew our party. And then once people see role models as, for example, women, then other women would come in, other women would get selected. And so, which is why in my party, we've seen now already so many female leaders. And by the way, good and bad. Okay. I think there are equally good and bad women as there are equally good and bad men. But the important thing is to try and get people in from a variety of walks of life. And I think we succeeded that. And certainly a lot of the women that I encouraged to come in, supported, mentored, have risen to leadership positions in the party, including our current leader, who's Kemi Badenoch, who is originally of Nigerian parents were Nigerian, and she's not just the first female; she's the first Black leader of any party in the UK. So I'm sort of proud. I'm particularly proud of her because I think she's a great person. I know her, and I think she'll be a tremendous leader. I just think diversity is important, because particularly female voices. Women bring a very different approach to debate, to argument, to policy making, and so on. And I think certainly my party, the Conservative Party, have benefited hugely by increasing female representation in my party. I mean, we've also had, obviously, we've had our first Asian leader in my party. We've had people, Blacks, and other ethnic minorities who've had important positions in politics. And so certainly, if there's one achievement I did in politics, was certainly my role in creating and supporting Women to Win, because I think certainly my party and the country's benefited from that.
Wow, incredible. So you are pioneering, actually, really, from your very first hand, what you have done, that great stuff. And because my PhD is paper based, probably like yours. I don't know. You're also publishing papers for your PhD, or you just
I'm too lazy.
or you making?
No, I spent too much time in Ukraine. I had no, literally,
Okay.
I was.
But I mean,
I've literally run I have my PhD is due in 8 weeks. I used every deferral extension I could do. I got a letter in August last year telling me if I didn't return from Ukraine, they were going to boot me out. So I had to come back to sort of finish my PhD. So my PhD finishes in 8 weeks, and then I'm going to go back to Ukraine.
To Ukraine, okay.
But importantly, my PhD or DPhil is to do with another charitable cause that I got involved in 15 years ago, which was education in Rwanda. And
yes, it will be my next question.
Okay.
But if we go a little bit Yes, a little bit. I just want one comment about this gender equality, because my PhD is paper based, and the third paper is actually touching the topic of gender equality and about Norwegian government or reform. We had we one of the pioneer country where, Norway, they went further, not just like advocating mentoring, but they also put it in a law. It's right that in boards it should be at least 40% of females. First it was a big company, but now I believe from next year we have the new law is coming that it should be also middle-sized company that the board. So, but what evidence-based? I was interviewing a lot of CEO and people who are in charge and at executive levels, right? Because still, even we have this 40% of women at boards, but if you see at all CFO, CSO, okay, maybe CFO women, right? But still, it's men, like we call it, with white colors from the same school. Here in Norway, white guy, 50-52, the same from the same school, and they try to involve the same guy, right? Again, with the similar vision and everything. So, but what do you think about means? Like it should be like a law, or it's still, because then it's like, many women, they don't like to be quoted, like they say that they just feel sometimes that, okay, now because
Yeah,
of law
yeah.
they invited me and now I'm saying no.
I think it has to come from within. So I give the example of the Conservative Party versus Labour Party in the UK. Labour Party had mandatory all women shortlists to select women for Parliament. We didn't. What we did was to try and support the women that did want to go in, because women are perfectly capable to get to where they want to without the need for quotas, in my view. And certainly politically, we showed that in the Conservative Party, because I think we've already had 4 female leaders in the past 20 years. So no, I'm not a believer in quotas at all, because I believe women are equally qualified, probably more qualified than a lot of men. So I don't support that. What we should have is the framework and structure to support women who want, for example, to go on boards. And companies should want to have them, right? They should want to have them
Right.
because they bring a different perspective. And I think that's probably a generational thing. I think that if we look to my children's generation, they wouldn't even question, having a diverse board, because there are lots of people of good quality. You don't want diversity for the sake of diversity. You want good people,
Yes.
but good people from a diverse background.
Yes, absolutely. So it should be championing of them skills, talents, right? You have special scope. What kind of special skills and talents you need? It should be win-win situation, like you said. It should be really puzzle, like for have also healthy organizational culture. I mean, it's so important, right? So okay, thank you so much. So now we go further, because my third question was about this woman to win, but now you have already use this brilliant example. So now if we go into this part about empowering youth and young people, right? Because you've been also involved in some campaign which is called the Million Jobs Campaign, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. So let me give the
and it was
background.
addressing unemployment, right? Because just lately, yesterday, I could read some data from World Economic Forum, and now, believe me or not, like statistically, now we have nearly 65 million youth are unemployed, and especially it was a high percentage after the pandemic, and it's still this impact. And the nearly 65, like I said, years old unemployed, and especially global south, especially sub-Saharan in Africa, particularly affected, with just 3 new jobs created for every 11 young Africans. And for me, it was like also kind of shocking that one good friend of mine, he was at with a partner mission with UNICEF in South Africa. He said, "Oh, Valeriya, I met a young man, Keegan, and who told me that he had 2 choices in life: pick up a book or pick up a gun. It's not that easy time for young people starting their careers. Globally, 65 million are unemployed." And like I said, maybe could you please share your engagement and in this endeavor as well, please?
Sure. Again, this was really through politics. So after 2008 and the 2008 crash, there was a lot of employment, obviously a lot of employment all around the world, but the people who were hit the hardest were young people. And young people were finding it hard to get a job. So when my party got into power in 2010 now, which is 15 years ago, I thought about how do we help young people? Because unemployment rate of young people was twice as high as the overall population. So something was going on. So and you needed to encourage employers to hire people. So I came up with a solution, which was through the tax system, that there's something called national insurance, that if you employ somebody, you pay an extra, let's say 10% to employ somebody. That's what you have to contribute to the exchequer. So I came up with a policy that for anybody under 24 or 24 and under, if you employed them, you paid no national insurance contribution. So there was an economic incentive for companies to hire young people. And so through the tax system, we encouraged employers to do that. And that quickly brought down youth unemployment to exactly the same as everybody else within a year. It was amazing how quickly an economic incentive worked. So that wasn't really a case of diversity. That was a case of giving young people a chance. If you don't have a foot on the employment ladder, it's very difficult then for you to pay for rent, to move out of your parents' house, and to become an adult. So this was a mechanism to try and help that. And certainly in the sort of I think we developed the policy in 2012, and within 2 or 3 years, it was it was successful. And actually, the policy I think continued after I left Parliament in 2015. So yeah, I think it was a good idea. It was a good idea not for diversity, though. It was a good idea to give young people a foot on the employment ladder.
Absolutely. And of course, we know we people, yes, we always should have initiative and motivational factors. And we know finance aspect of as motivation, it's always one most effective motivational factors. It was, of course, great idea. And you said it, and I think it also was for the cause of diversity, because can you imagine, we are also socioeconomic, and we will talk later about it. We actually, every single person is a unique resource, right? And if we are talking about diversity of brains, then absolutely everything you do, as many special, like fresh people, young people with fresh blood, fresh solution, it's also kind of diversity, right? So yes, it was great. And now would you like, because before I'm asking about Ukraine, which of course is my very dearest topic, and would you like to share a little bit more about your heartful topic, also about Rwanda, what you are actually doing here, there, and for them, and you still, because you're flying, like you're mostly Ukraine and there, like, and sometimes just home. Yeah. Can you tell us?
So,
Because I saw a lot of beautiful pictures, and maybe now I have also actually idea to be there to see everything with my own eyes. But again, everything you are doing, it's like fantastic. We should clone people like you.
thank you. Maybe not, but
Yeah.
So again, it was sort of oddly enough, it was sort of an accident. A friend of mine said he was going out to Rwanda, was bringing a group of people out. Would I go with him? And I'd never been to Africa, knew nothing about international development, but he sort of twisted my arm, said, "Look, it's just for 2 weeks. Come out. You know, it would be great for you to come and support me." So I sort of did, and it changed. It certainly changed my life, and I didn't realize what an impact using whatever organizational skill sets, support that I could do in a different cultural setting. And to be honest, it could have been Rwanda, Sierra Leone, or any developing country setting. It just happened to be Rwanda, which I've sort of fallen in love with. And so I was working at an orphanage school there, and with about 83 children, and the place was falling apart. There were holes in the roof. There was no electricity, no water. And because I'm organized, as we'll see in Ukraine later on, I quickly, within a day, saw what the problems were at the school, put in £5,000 of my own money, and set about with a team of people who we got working with us to fix the roof, fix the walls, bring electricity to the school, and to get these huge tanks of water so the children would have water as well. And I remember there was a very cynical journalist who turned up towards the end of my time there and said, "Brooks, you're here for a couple of weeks. What possible difference can you make?" And I said, "Well, I'm not changing the world here. I admit that. But see these 83 kids, they have a better infrastructure and life, a place to go to school than they did before I turned up." So that was a short-term impact. The longer-term issue became that it was suddenly in the newspapers in Rwanda. And so what happened was then I left Rwanda to go back to Parliament where I was working. And I get this call 6 weeks later from somebody I'd met there who said, "Brooks, that school of yours, that school? There's a problem. Rwanda Health and Safety want to shut it down." I said, "What do you mean they want to shut it down? Like, why?" I fixed it up. They said, "Yeah, that's the problem. There are now 343 children in a school for 80 kids, and all the rooms are overcrowded." So I quickly got on a plane, went back to Rwanda, and went in to see the Minister of Education and said to him, "Look, don't shut the school down. I will rebuild a school." And so I then set about over the next 2 years, getting planning permission, everything to build a new school about a kilometer away. And I rebuilt a school for 300 plus children, which was really a primary kindergarten, nursery, primary school, which then ended up being, within 5 years, one of the top 5 schools in Rwanda. And that sort of was the genesis of, not to switch direction, was when I left Parliament, I sort of ended up at Oxford, where I am now. You can see all my books. And I wasn't sure what to do. An old professor of mine here said to come back. And I said, "What do I do?" He says, "You'll figure that out when you get there." And I did. And I met somebody from the education department. He asked me to talk about my charity. And then I said, "Can I sit in on your class?" And so I did. Then I realized, even though I have an education charity, I know nothing about education. So then I said to him, "Can I do your master's course?" So he said, "Sure." So I applied, did the master's, wrote a dissertation on Rwanda, education in Rwanda. And he said, "Stay on and do a doctorate." So here I am, almost 10 years after I left Parliament, about to finish my doctorate on education reform in Rwanda. But it's been an amazing journey because I've had an impact. You talk about impact. I've had an impact on thousands of young children that have now gone through my school, really over the past decade. Compounded to which I realize, children can't learn unless they have good teachers. And so what I did was I then set up a teacher training center next to my school where I bring other teachers from around Rwanda to be taught by my teachers, who are Rwandan, by the way. So I made sure I hired and trained local Rwandans, not white people like me, to come in and teach my children. So we're teaching best practices to other teachers who will then go on and teach their children around the whole of Rwanda. So the impact I'm having is sort of multiplied by teaching teachers how to teach well.
Oh my God, and for me it's so touching when you're even one word can start that reaction, because now I said my children, and actually before you mentioned that, I wanted to say it. Oh my God, can you imagine how many kids you have? Actually, you have so many children, right? You are that rich father of so many kids. And that comment when the very first one you got, okay, Brooks, you just for 2 weeks here, and okay, maybe you just repair the walls, and but you are not changing the world. But you said, yes, maybe I'm not here to change the world, but can you imagine it was 82 kids
83. Yeah, I
first,
remember
but
the number, 83.
already then you have changed world for 82 kids already then, right? You could give him a hope, the most important. You could really give them example how to act, how to handle. You really have changed the world, and then it's also this escalation. So yes, now you have your kids, your own kids. Oh my God. Can you imagine if, like, Christmas time and all these kids, one day they should gather together? All kids you have said from Ukraine, from Rwanda. We need, in the middle, we need to establish a little Brooks country, Brooksland, something like that. Brooksland, it's cool. Yes, and now we are coming to, yes, Angels for Ukraine. Oh my God, of course. When I first could read about that, the article, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Really, basically, I was like, "What?" I read, but then I need to restart and read it again, because I was like, "Oh my God, is this really true? That person like that?" I've met some samples in my life, and I cannot combine like directly, but still also, like, I'm not trying to show off that always, okay, I have adopted 2 kids with special diagnosis many years ago. I was working voluntarily in special institutions and have done a lot over there. And I always keep a low profile as well, because it's not for my marketing campaign and everything. But when I saw yours, like, from it's not like that to that, but like, wow, can is it really what you have done? But I know the story that actually which also give me so much proof that you're so kind, genuine person inside, because you had your friend in Rwanda which invited you, and you just joined, and then I could remember from your interview that you had a friend in Baltic countries, right? Who
That's right.
also invited you, and then said, "Oh my God,
Latvia.
it's so
Exactly right.
yeah, it's so great person. He has globally so many good friends."
But the important message for people listening to this is, you can sit at home, you can watch TV, you can listen to music, you can read, you can do whatever you want, right? But when someone gives you an opportunity to do something different, just try it, right? So I had an opportunity to go to Rwanda for 2 weeks. I could have gone, or I could not have gone. If I hadn't gone, a whole dimension of life would not have emerged. If I hadn't looked at Instagram on the 24th of February and seen a friend of mine from Latvia who was on the border already between Poland and Ukraine with a bus, and I suddenly, just on impulse, said, "Hey, I'm free for a week or so. Why don't I come out for 4 days?" And 4 days became 2 weeks.
4 days.
It ultimately became 2 years. So sometimes you just have to take a little bit of risk and to sort of get off your ass and to go and do something. You never know how it might change your life.
Absolutely. And I don't believe in coincidence, and I actually believe in God. And you see, I have special icon. Actually, all this is a special book I made myself. It's one of my hobbies. All this handcrafted, actually, I made myself. But I, like you said, yes, it's our destiny, and I believe like God really decides all all big things which how our life should be impacted and shaped, and who we are facing, right? But courage, yes, it's our, actually at the end of the day it's our choice, like you said, just to sit and not to do anything risky, which is also probably it's okay for people for functioning society to keep it together, like because if everybody was like doing all the time risky stuff, so probably then, but I really believe that people don't meet by coincidence. It's something. It should be really something much greater than that. But at the end of the day, you should. It starts from us, right? It's not like we're just playing and then okay, God, what is next for me? It doesn't work like that. If you dream about, you should work for your dreams. But then, like you said, you should raise up and do something, right?
Mm.
So so yes, please tell us about this. So you met your friend and you came there, and it was from four
Yeah,
days to
yeah. So if you just give me sort of 3 or 4 minutes to leap through the story here. So
yeah,
I was
absolutely.
doing my doctorate. I had just finished my field research in Rwanda,
Mhm.
in fact, and the war started in Ukraine. And I was actually about to go scuba diving, um, and I saw this post from this Latvian guy I'd met once, and he was
Okay.
on the war. He was already on the border, and so I messaged him. I canceled my scuba trip, and I said, "Can I come out to see you?" And he said, "Sure." So he picked me up. I flew out via London, picked some warm clothes because it was like minus 25 at this stage in
Mm.
Ukraine. Um, and he picked me up from, in fact, from the airport in Warsaw, and then we drove to the border near Rzeszów, and we and I sort of joined him, and he had in fact, he had 3 buses at that stage, uh, who were, and we were going to these huge refugee centers where there were literally hundreds of thousands of people. And, I would certainly say at the beginning of the war, I would give particular credit to the Polish people who were
Yeah.
amazingly hospitable, unlike almost any country. I think there were over 2 million people went through Poland in those early days. And
Mhm.
so we started moving them to only 3 countries in Europe would take them, in Western Europe would take them, which was, I think it was Luxembourg, Germany, and possibly France at the time. And so we started busing them to those 3 cities. After I stayed on beyond 4 days because I was sort of enjoying it. You feel good because you're helping so many people, and it's so chaotic.
Yes.
If you're bringing a little bit of organization and structure, you're doing something good, right? Not for the hundreds of thousands of people, but certainly for the people who immediately need the help, right? So
Mhm.
I was hearing stories of people charging people a lot of money to take them away from Kiev. So
Yeah.
my friend had to go back to Latvia. So I said to him, "Can you get me a bus? Because I want to go into Ukraine and I want to move these people away for free." And so he said, "Look, I'll get you 3 buses." And he got me 3 buses from Lithuania, not his more expensive
Mhm.
buses, and gave me someone who could speak Russian. And we sort of went into Ukraine, and we started busing people away from Kiev. Russians were pushed out. The deputy mayor, who we got to know, said, "Hey, I've been seeing what you're doing. You're very organized. Is there any way you can go down south? Because a lot of people are trying to get away from Mariupol." So, and there were a number of cities outside, just to the north and northwest of Mariupol, where there were a lot of people who were congregating but couldn't go anywhere, right? So I went down south, and he introduced me to a couple of the mayors there. And then my bus drivers, who were Lithuanian, didn't know the road, so we contacted a national bus company. And
Mhm.
I said, "Do you have any buses I can use or rent?" And they said, "Yeah, how many do you want?" I said, 20. You just threw out a number, and they said, "Fine, you can have 20." And I said, "And the bus drivers, and I'll pay for the drivers, I'll pay for the petrol. Just give me buses." And so we did. And so we went down south, we were moving people away. Um, then, unfortunately, the Russians took control of Mariupol. The tide of people slowed down. We'd moved a lot of people by that stage.
Mhm.
Um, And then the mayors down where I was said, actually, where you should go, actually, one of the mayors in Vinica, in fact, said, you should, excuse me, you should go to Kharkiv. So he introduced me to the mayor of Kharkiv. I couldn't take my buses because they were from a different bus company out east, because Ukraine is huge, very, very wide, as you know, almost 1,000 kilometers across. So I went out to Kharkiv, met with the person helping coordinate this, and I said, "Hey, I'll do this for you for free." And so I started working with Kharkiv City Council and with the military, and they said, "Okay, we're going to send you to these villages that are between Russia and Kharkiv, so that 25-kilometer bit between the border, where unfortunately there were a lot of bombs still being dropped there. They were targeted by the Russians." So the first problem I had was I couldn't get any bus drivers to go with me. So I said to them, "Okay, I'm going. Like, who's going to come with me?" I sort of guilted them, and I found 2 buses and 4 bus drivers who would come with me. I think they felt if this crazy Brit was willing to do this, they would do it as well. So I took these. There were a lot of people doing what I was trying to do, but on a small scale, moving people 1 and 2 at a time. I wanted to do it at scale. And so the buses I had could carry either 25 or 50 people. So I sort of went out there. Once other bus drivers saw that I was doing that, other bus drivers would come and help. But then the next problem I had was a lot of people thought I was going to kidnap them because it was for free. And I was kidnapping them, taking them to Russia. So I came up with the ingenious idea of making people pay 10 grivny, which for your listeners is about 10 cents or 10p. And I think a lot of the people realized even the Russians wouldn't charge us 10 pence to get on a bus. So I then spent the next 6 months, pretty much the next 6 months in Kharkiv, going to all those villages, Kramatorsk, Izium, and so on, taking people out and taking them to Lviv. And over that 6-month period, I must have moved about 11,000 women and children, mainly from those frontline villages, and took them to Lviv. I have to say that probably 90% of the people I moved stayed in Ukraine, but they moved from the east to the west of the country where it was a little safer. And probably by the end of my first year, I'd moved, I think by February 2023, I'd probably moved close to 35,000 plus. And I stopped producing my numbers because a lot of the people I was also moving were wounded soldiers, and the government didn't want me to publish figures of any wounded soldiers that I was moving. So I moved, in fact, more than 35,000, but it's a big number. So I just capped it at 35,000. And I say people, I moved 35,000, but the number probably was closer to 50.
Yeah, I believe.
So, but then the next issue became when there was that counteroffensive in late 2022, when the Russians were pushed out of Kharkiv Oblast. A lot of people wanted to go back to the villages I'd already taken them from. So I went back to the villages bringing humanitarian aid. So late 22, 23 was about humanitarian aid drops. And I did a lot and people in Europe were very, very generous. So we'd get these huge containers. We'd sort the containers out. We'd put a mixture of warm bedding, warm clothes, dry bulk food, basic medical aid kits in these boxes. And then we would take them to all these villages. And that's pretty much what I spent, certainly the latter end of 22, first half of 23. And then the final phase of what we did was a lot of children were suffering from PTSD, we noticed, or I noticed. So we decided to set up a training program to train an adult for every school in Ukraine, which we're still trying to do, so that they understood the rudiments of PTSD to give children support. And we worked with the Ministry of Education for that. So before we were working with Ministry of Health, Ministry of Transportation, and so on. This time we're working with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health, but mainly Ministry of Education, at which people would get a certificate having gone through our course on a basic PTSD training. So that continues to be. So a lot of the support that we're doing at Angels for Ukraine is mainly either helping children with mental health issues as a result of the war, and helping soldiers who've lost limbs. So we're bringing all sorts of aids for soldiers and civilians, in fact, who've unfortunately lost limbs due to the war. So that's briefly the arc of my story in Ukraine. By the
Yes,
way,
and of
not knowing
course,
Ukraine, not speaking Ukrainian or anything, but just on impulse going in there, but finding there was a huge amount of goodwill in Ukraine to have somebody like me come in and help. And I found everybody was open to my offering to help. And sometimes I get a bit bossy, so I would tell people what they should do and to deal with the bureaucracy, because Ukrainians love bureaucracy like many countries.
yeah.
And so I would, because I, can be quite pushy sometimes, I push through the bureaucracy to get things done. A lot of times even when I was told you can't go to this village or you can't do this because the Russians are doing this, unless I said you think like a sniper is going to shoot me, I'm going to go. And so I sort of got used to, over a year, 2 years, the sound of bombs dropping around me. In fact, when it was silence, I could hear the silence was deafening because I couldn't hear anything. There was no noise. I grew addicted, I think, to the noise of bombs dropping. So it's been an amazing journey. When I finish my PhD or doctoral philosophy here at Oxford, I'm going to go back to Ukraine and continue to help out in any way that I can.
Oh my God, this is story. It's unbelievable. It's even more unbelievable when I'm living through and experience everything now with you. And when you are saying like you have done that, like and on scaling, some people that can just mention they have done, but I know from the very first time you and me we've been speaking that's what touched my heart mostly, because you have done it by yourself. You shepherd people. I saw it, like it's not like, okay, I signed or I was there or I was donated. I don't say that people in all possible ways who can help, of course it's amazing, but what you have done, like, I mean, risking your own health and emotional health, mental health, and physical health. And thanks God that Angel Brooks, Saint Brooks, which is bossy, which is taking action and everything. Can you imagine how many people you have saved? Because you in this situation when it's totally chaos, right? Somebody should take decisions. Somebody should really act and take responsibility. It's so important that you can accumulate all these skills. And for me, yes, like you, I'm now like reflecting that I also believe that this experience, and we reflect about childhood and everything, it's this special experience which feeling so much your heart. Because my mom, she always taught me that, Valeriya, you can be two type of persons, giver and taker. By taking, you feel in your hands, but giving, you feel in your heart. So I'm always try to live like a giver, not like a taker. And I just can imagine, because you're double scaled giver. So
but
yes,
it
and all this emotion.
but it goes back to the point, your very first question, right? That
Yes, right.
as a small child, I'd always wished somebody would rescue me from my situation, right? And so there's this compulsion to rescue or to help really manifested itself really in Ukraine, where I had this amazing opportunity to go out and literally, as you say, rescue people. And I could do it at scale because I'm organized, and as I said, I'm pushy, but I'm also a risk taker, right? So people say, "Oh, that's amazing what you've done." Actually, I really enjoyed it, right? Every day I'm in Ukraine, I feel I'm doing something good, and there's no amount of physical gifts. So I grew up. Fun enough, I grew up with someone who was very transactional. My mother would, in order to get any affection from me, because it was about me, her, not her, me, she would give me something, right? And so the idea of something, a physical gift to make me feel good was never good, right? Because it was always a transactional thing. Where I feel good is when I'm doing good, right? This is why I love being a politician. I love doing my charity work. Why? Because it makes me feel good every day, right? This is what makes me feel good. I think people that, you see lots of people, both men and women, who accumulate things, right? Big cars, expensive jewelry, flying on planes, whatever. They're superficially happy, right? It's like eating a Haribo, a gummy bear, right? You get that immediate sugar fix of, oh, I have a sparkly whatever, or I'm driving in a big car. I must feel good. They don't feel good, right? They don't, because
No.
it's a hole within them. It's a hole within their soul. They're trying to fill with something physical, but you can't fill it with something physical, right? You
No.
can't put a car or a plane or a piece of jewelry in your heart, right? What you can
It's
do is,
just very short, toxic shot. That's
that's
it. But then
right.
you need more and more and more, and it's never enough
And
because
it's
yes.
never enough. Okay, it's never ever enough. You know, people joke there are no happy billionaires in the world. These are all
Yeah.
unhappy people. Okay, they're unhappy, probably going back to their childhood as well, because they're trying to fill a void in them, and their proxy for making them feel good is money, right? But no amount of money is going to make them feel good. If you're Bill
Yeah.
Gates, you're not Elon Musk today, right? Elon Musk, you're not so and so. There's always going to be somebody else who's got more than you.
Yes.
So you've got to
Greedy and
figure
greedy.
out,
It's our nature,
you got to
people
figure out
nature. Yes.
what will make you feel happy. What is it? And actually, most people feel good when they do something good. By the way, it doesn't need to be for human beings. A lot of people do amazing things for animals, right? Cat rescue, dog rescue. There are lots of things people can do to make themselves feel good. And my only advice for people is try something. If you're not happy, try something different. And I think you'll find doing good things for other people actually makes you feel good.
Thank you so much. And actually, I would have wrapped with this brilliant statement, but I just want to very briefly go through the last question because in my personal story and also the subject for podcast, okay, it's diversity, it's game changer, but I also want to touch a little bit another perspective approach to diversity, and I would like to talk a little bit about neurodiversity, which is more and more now getting attention, and I think is so important because nearly 25% of people actually on our planet, I'm so happy that we are changing this even narrative, how we call it, like not disabled, disabilities, weaknesses, just all this negative charge vocabulary, which is making so people depressive, and it's already exclusion then, not inclusion, right? But neurodiversity, the whole powerful idea that why, if our fingertips are so different, why our brains should be so equal, and then you are normal. But if, like me, I have OCD, or like, right, and then it's immediately I'm dysfunction, I'm disabled. Yes, I have my challenges. Yes, I have my special approach to I process this world information and memory differently, but it doesn't mean it's just black or white, right? We all that different, and we kind of need to find a place where society start also moving a little bit towards us. It's not just we should fit in all the time. We cannot fit in all the time to be normal. What is normal actually, right? So if you just before we wrapping up, saying about your idea, have you heard about? Of course, you are so we have already talked actually, right? Just even me like friendly talk about that. But could you just give an idea to our listeners? What is your perspective to neurodiverse and neurodivergent people?
Sure. I mean, I oddly enough, I didn't even know about it until one of my children came up to me and said that he he is neurodiverse. So I've always thought of him, he's been a very different child, right? Incredibly kind, but very quiet. And he started posting stuff on neurodiversity, neurodivergent. He's been trying to get a job, and he says, "Hey, I'm neurodiverse. Will you hire somebody? You must have a policy on hiring neurodiverse people." So it was really through my son who I've begun to understand this. And you talk about, you sort of say normal people. Nobody's normal, right? There is not a single person out there listening to you who's normal, right? We all have our quirks and differences. People who are neurodiverse, people who are disabled, for example, they're not disabled, they're able. They're just abled in a different way than many other people. So we have to turn this on its head and think of people as abled, but just different, and who bring a different perspective on things. And so it goes back to earlier in our conversation that in any organization, we should be proactive, because it helps the organization to bring in people with different perspectives. And individuals who are neurodiverse are no different than that, okay? They just bring a different way of looking at the world. Quite usually, a lot of times, a very unique way at looking at the world. So I think it's important that if companies are thinking about bringing in different types of people, and obviously a very simple form is, gosh, we need more women, but actually, we need other type of human beings as well, of which neurodiversity is sort of one aspect of trying to bring somebody in who, maybe 99 times out of 100, may not have the right idea, but their one idea will be so different than everybody else's, it'll have an impact on the organization. So, I say probably even a year ago, I didn't even know what neurodiverse was. I've sort of been educated by one of my children who has explained to me what it is and everything. And so I've done a little bit of homework, as you would expect of me to do, and realize that in the same way I've always felt about people who have disabilities, I view them as people with abilities. Neurodiverse people are the same. My approach is the same thing. They bring something different and positive. Therefore, we should be proactive, probably, or organizations should be proactive in trying to hire or support people with neurodiverse backgrounds.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to me, because it's my subject. I'm going to enlighten more and more, because I think it's so important. When we started talking this show, right? It's first of all our stories, just people, right? And we all in some kind the same, but we have our issues, and and we all different, but it's so important, right, that we should count on every single voice in our society, and especially now when we are facing the global problems like political situations, climate change. We should really count on every single voice. Yes. So thank you so much. It was such an amazing pleasure to have you. I could sit and just chat with you more and more and more, and you know me. But and one day, maybe in Rwanda, when you have your dispute, I can come and we can sit and talk the whole night.
You can come and visit me in Kyiv. How about that? Come back to Ukraine.
Yeah, so Kyiv, we can celebrate.
New year, yeah.
Yeah, but absolutely the last one, I would like to implement this tradition on diversity is the game changer, because we started from childhood, which is something nice and magical, and I would like that we also we went through different challenges and political situation and many stuff which is kind of painful now what's happening in our world, but I would like to at the end to always uplift and to have very nice background or back feelings after wrapping up. So that's why I decided to ask the same question for everybody. If we just for a second go to childhood and we all I've been inspired by fairy tales, and now we go into magical times. It's Christmas, so even more we can manifest that we're in fairy tale. And if you should imagine fantasy now that we are in Aladdin, you know, this 1001 night, and then of course this magical lamp, and this is Genie, who was right so efficient, could make all possible 3 wishes, and if you could fantasy imagine that I'm your Mrs. Genie today, but a little bit more shy possibilities, just 1 wish, not 3 but 1. I can yes, the wish can be yours. It can be small, it can be private, it can be big, for the wall, whatever. But what would your magical wish would be to me, who is your genie from the lamp?
That's a very deep question for me. I think I think there are two things. I'm going to ask. Well, actually, Genie, you're allowed 3 wishes, so I'm going to get 3 wishes. Okay. I think the first one is.
I'm shy possibility. Okay, 3. Okay. I'll talk to the boss.
First one is certainly an internal one, which is to find peace, to find peace inside of myself. I think in order to have a healthy life, you need to find peace, and I'm always in search of finding that internal peace. It's progression, and I'm getting there, and I feel much better now than I did 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but it's a journey. So to help me on that journey to find inner peace. So that's a sort of selfish wish. I think an external wish is sort of the next level, which is for obviously my family, that my family, finds, whatever their mission is in life. And I don't think necessarily they have done, but you want them to wake up every day like I sort of feel I do now, and I do what I want to do because I'm sort of happy at doing what I'm doing. And I think it's important that they find whatever brings them joy. And I think more broadly, though, I'm very focused on education, and I think we all, society broadly, needs to do a much better job at providing education for all young people. I think education is the root to everything, and for me, everything in life. And it's not necessarily money, but it gives you some sense of stability. It's hopefully stops bad behavior and everything. So it gives people an opportunity. And as you touched on, in Africa particularly, and this is where I'm studying my DPhil, if we go round in a circle, is what is going wrong with our education system? We're piling billions and billions into it, and it's still not functional. So we need to figure out what can we do better to improve education, because if we improve education, we improve the lives of billions. So that's a very long answer to your short question.
Yeah, but it's amazing. Yes, and it just last quote about education, right? Like they say, please don't try to give much fish. Okay, kids, people,
you don't give a
try
fish, you give
to
them a rod.
teach them how to fish. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
So amazing. Thank you so much. And your work has already touched so many lives, and it's been an absolute honor to have you today on my very first show. I hope you enjoy it. And thank you for inspiring us all by your tremendous example. And we can't see what is next for you. We will be joining your journey further. And for me, so I would like to thank you all. We will be enjoying our conversation soon. And just want to wrap up with the quote about diversity, which is, remember, strength lies in difference, not in our similarity, because diversity is a rainbow of our humanity. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brooks. Have a blissful evening. It was a pleasure to have you. And yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay with us for the next episode.
Okay. Thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you again.